Good morning, good morning. Welcome back. If you're joining me for book 2, I think Emerson will be joining me in a minute. I saw him when I was reading book 1. All right, chapter 10 is called Rumpelstiltskin's Debt. All right, I'm going to give Emerson like 20 seconds to join. And once he joins, hopefully he'll come in 20 seconds. Longest 20 seconds of your life, huh? I lost track. I'm looking at the time. Actually, there he is. Hi, Emerson. Wow, you made it right on time. I gave you 20 seconds to join, and you did join. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to start, okay? Have you read this chapter yet, Emerson? Have you read this chapter yet? Ah, that's so fun. You can get ahead of us. How much of this book did you read? Did you read the whole book? Oh, I can't type. Oh my gosh, you read the whole book? Oh my gosh. Which book are you on right now? Are you reading another one? Wow, you've been reading a lot. You read all of them? Are you serious? Every single one? Wait, how long has school been out? Oh, I guess we've been out for like a month and a half now, right? Since June something. June 18th? It's been a month and a half. No, it's been a month. Yeah. Wow. Wow, you're really ready for 5th grade now, cuz you're a speed reader, buddy. All right, that's good. That's going to be good for your fluency. For your Dibble score, you're going to do really well. Awesome. I don't know if you're dibbling this year, but you'll do well. Oh, you've been rereading over and over again? That's awesome. Well, you should try to catch up. You should, okay, so what you should do is go to book 2, and after I read chapter 10, you should read it. Or have the book in front of you right now and read it while I'm reading it. We could read it together. It might be fun. You could race me. No, don't race me. I do a lot of talking in between. All right, I'm going to read, okay? Rumpelstiltskin's debt. Let's see if you can read these words correctly. That's a big word right there. Pinocchio prison. What? Pinocchio prison? Am I in the right place? When do we go to Pinocchio's prison? I have no idea what happened before this. What happened? Where are we? Alex and Connor nodded, but they already knew there wouldn't be anything to discuss. Oh, they met Froggy. They're getting out of Dwarf Forest, right? Alex and Connor were so relieved to make contact. Okay, well, I have no idea what's going on right now. Pinocchio prison was home to the most dangerous criminals in all the kingdoms. Oh, it was a tall, dark fortress that sat in the center of a long peninsula that curved around Mermaid Bay in the southern part of the Eastern Kingdom. It was perched at the top of a high and rocky cliff with sharp spikes pointing inward and outward at every window, so there was no possible way to escape or gain unauthorized entry. Enchanted wooden soldiers patrolled the narrow stone halls, keeping watch on the lawbreakers behind bars. The majority of those locked away were typical sheep stealing ogres, kidnapping witches, and man eating animals that had been caught before they fled into the dwarf forests. The prison was also the home of a great mystery. During the 100-year sleeping curse the Eastern Kingdom had endured, the prison had been the only place in the kingdom that had been spared. All the soldiers and inmates inside had strangely remained conscious while the rest of the country had slumbered. More recently, the mystery had developed when the prison also became the only place in the kingdom not covered in the Enchantress' demonic thorn bushes and vines. Whether it was a fluke or a miracle was the question. Many assumed the prison was just too far removed to be affected by the curses. However, unbeknownst to all the soldiers and inmates inside, the prison's exclusion from the kingdom's greatest woes was due to a high profile prisoner who resided on the 13th floor. Rumpelstiltskin was serving his 127th year behind bars. Whoa, what did Rumpelstiltskin do? Do you guys remember? Emerson, do you remember what Rumpelstiltskin did? Why is he in jail for so long? 127 years? That's a long time. Do you remember? As I take a sip of my coffee. Gosh, I don't think I remember. I don't remember Rumpelstiltskin's story. Let's see. Let's see if. Oh, you're right. Tried to steal the baby. That's right, that's right. I completely forgot. All right, let me continue to read. He was a very small man with large baggy eyes, a button nose, and short hair that clung to his head like a helmet. Sounds like he needs a shower. He wore a large collared shirt, tight pants on his tiny legs, and pointed red shoes that jingled when he walked. Oh, I guess he can't sneak up on anybody, huh? After his, here it is, infamous failed attempt to take the firstborn child of the Eastern Kingdom's former queen, Rumpelstiltskin went into hiding. There it is. But after a few years of being at large, that means running away, being a fugitive, the small man couldn't live with the guilt of what he had almost done. So 127 years ago, he decided to turn himself in and had lived at Pinocchio prison ever since. I guess he has a heart, huh? He has a conscience. Rumpelstiltskin had a tiny chamber all to himself. He had two barred windows, one on the heavy door of the cell, and another on the wall facing Mermaid Bay. Both were too high for him to see out of unless he jumped, so the dark stones of his chamber floor and walls were all he had to look at every day. Oh, that'll make me go crazy. His life had simplified greatly while in prison. He slept on a large stack of hay in the corner and ate on a tiny table, pushed to the side with only one spoon and his and a bowl in his possession. And bowl in his possession, sorry. Although Rumpelstiltskin had many magical capabilities, he had decided to give them up when he went to prison, fearing magic would only lead him to trouble. He kept his quarters as simple as possible. Wow, sounds like a good guy, huh? The first decade or so of imprisonment was incredibly lonely for the little man, but luckily for him, an unexpected roommate eventually moved in. Ooh, I wonder who's going to move in. One day, a strong ocean breeze blew a seed into his chamber, and a week later, a small daisy began to grow in between two rocks of the stone floor. Rumpelstiltskin was amazed such a thing could happen. How could something so pleasant grow in such a miserable place? Of all the locations in the world, why did it decide to land here? He pondered the question for a great while, glad of something to distract him from his solitude and shame. He ultimately decided the flower must have needed a friend as much as he did, and that its presence in his cell had been purposeful. He took great care of the flower, impressively keeping it alive the entire time he had been in the prison. Wow, 100 something years? It's crazy. That daisy's as old as him. Or, no, it's older than him, obviously, but dang, that's crazy. He shared his water with the daisy. He told it stories, and when it felt ill, he would stand on his tiptoes by the window with his spoon and reflect sunlight toward it until it regained its strength. Oh, that's really smart. That's really, really smart. To the average person, having a flower as a companion may have seemed a little odd. But for Rumpelstiltskin, it was the best friend he had ever had. The flower never mocked him for the clothes he wore like others had in the past. The flower never judged him for wanting the most out of life. The flower never used him for political gain, and the flower never condemned him for the mistakes he made years before. The flower was only capable of doing one thing. And what is it? Let's read it together, sharing its beauty. In a way, life in prison had been the best thing that had ever happened to Rumpelstiltskin, giving him the most meaningful relationship he had ever had. However, his self surrender hadn't only been a way for him to clear his conscience, it was also a way for him to protect himself from alliances he had made in his past. Unfortunately, after he spent so long hiding from the past, his past eventually found him. Rutro. It was just before sunset when a thunderous noise was heard outside the prison. It was an intense combination of snapping and crunching and popping that became louder and louder by the second. The prison began to shake. His bowl and spoon rattled on his table. Whatever it was getting closer. Rumpelstiltskin jumped up and down at his window, trying to see what was causing the commotion. What he saw was the most terrifying sight he had seen in years. Anybody know what he saw? I know Emerson does. Emerson, do you know what he saw? I'm gonna go grab a cushion real quick. Answer that question, okay? Look, I'm wearing your school shirt. Ah, there we go. This cushion on the bottom feels so much better. All right, let's see what it is. You didn't answer it, Emerson. The next word's gonna start with a vowel because I see an N right there. So like an apple, it can't be banana because banana's not a vowel. Oh, really? Is it? You spelled it wrong. It's supposed to be with a CH. But oh my gosh, are you serious? Like an enormous, earthy, there's your E word, enormous earthy stampede, a tsunami of angry thorn bushes and vines traveled across the land, growing in the prison's direction. Oh no! Rumpelstiltskin gasped. He clasped his hands around his mouth and looked around the cell. There was only one person capable of such magic. After 127 years, he knew she had finally come for him. The wooden soldiers rushed through the halls in a panic. Thorn bushes and vines are headed for the prison, one shouted. Prepare for an attack, another yelled. Rumpelstiltskin looked down at the daisy. It was quivering. There, there, little flower, he said, and gently stroked one of its leaves. Everything is going to be all right. I'm going to hide you. He quickly retrieved his bowl off the table and covered his friend with it. The prison was hit by the plants, and the impact made the whole fortress sway. The thorn bushes and vines crawled up the sides of the structure, wrapping around it like an army of serpents, until all the windows were covered and the prison went dim inside. After a few quiet moments, a series of soft rumbles pulsed through the prison like a giant heartbeat. Each rumble was stronger than the next and came from several floors below. Came from soft footsteps came down the hall and stopped at Rumpelstiltskin's cell door. He was trembling, afraid these were his last moments alive. Who is it? Who is it? A bright flash of violet light blasted the cell door into smithereens. Rumpelstiltskin braced himself and was pelted by its debris. Once the smoke from the blast cleared, he finally saw who had been causing all the chaos. Standing in the doorway of his cell was a tall and beautiful woman. She had long magenta hair that floated and rippled above her like slow moving flames. Her eyes were violet with long, feathered eyelashes like moth's antennae. She wore a long purple gown with matching gloves and a high collar. A ghostly cape flowed around her and through the hall like a thick sheet of smoke. Esmia? Rumpelstiltskin said in horror. The Enchantress's bright red lips curved into a smirk. Hello, Rumpy, Esmia said in her playful, airy voice. How I've missed you. Esmia stepped into Rumpelstiltskin's cell and examined the small chamber. Vines and thorn bushes followed her, growing around the walls of the cell, covering the inside of the prison as she traveled through it. I love what you've done with the place, Esmia said sarcastically, passing the stack of hay he used as a bed. It doesn't fit a man of your exquisite taste, though, does it? I can't imagine why you'd abandon me to spend 13 decades in here. Rumpelstiltskin remained very still, knowing it wasn't wise to make sudden movements around dangerous creatures. Have you come to kill me? He said with a quivering jaw. The Enchantress forced out a theatrical laugh that did little to comfort him. Sounds probably like ah 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 ah. Sounds theatrical. How do you like my theatrical laugh? You like it? Why would I want to kill my oldest friend? She said with a menacing smile. Besides, if I wanted you dead, I would have killed you years ago. Her smile faded and her violet eyes glared down at him. Why else do you think I spared you from all the curses I've cast over the kingdom so far? Rumpelstiltskin had always wondered if the exceptions were because of him. If you aren't going to kill me, then what brings you here? He asked, trembling even more. He was convinced she must have had fate worse than death planned for him. Look at you, Rumpy. You're just as helpless as the day I found you, Esmea said pityingly. When we met, you were just another miserable dwarf working in the mines, but I knew you and I were kindred spirits. We both wanted more than the world was offering us, and we both were ostracized because of it. I never meant to anger you, Rumpelstiltskin said, and lowered his head. I had to turn myself in. I couldn't live with what I have done. Or what you failed to do, that is, Esmea said. But all is forgiven. Rumpelstiltskin knew her too well to believe her. Esme had something up her sleeve. She always did. What do you want from me? He asked. Esme went to the window. The vines and thorn bushes covering the outside parted so she could see the view of the bay. Like it or not, we made a deal, she said. I've come back so you can finally fulfill your end of the bargain. I saved you from a melancholy life in the mines. I made you my apprentice and taught you magic, and all I ever asked in exchange was for your assistance. You never said I would have to kidnap a child, Rumpelstiltskin said, and a princess no less. I made it incredibly easy for you, Esmea said sharply, her tone growing angry. I bewitched the king into thinking he needed a wife who could spin hay into gold. I chose the village girl he ordered to do so. I planned the whole negotiation between the two of you. All you had to do was to take the child that was owed to you. You wanted me to do your dirty work? Rumpelstiltskin peeped. You wanted my name to be tarnished if anything went wrong. Of course I did, she said unapologetically. I was still in the happily ever after assembly at the time. I couldn't get caught stealing an infant princess. As far as the fairies knew, I was still one of them. As far as I knew, you were still one of them too, Rumpelstiltskin said. I thought I was going to be the apprentice of a great fairy, not an enchantress who was secretly plotting to take over the world. Esmea took delight in remembering the deception. Yes, everyone was surprised, she said. Of course, that all changed when the rest of the fairies found out you were working for me. And I wasn't invited to the child's christening. I lost my temper and cursed the whole kingdom to die. They would ha- they would have too if the fairy godmother hadn't converted my curse into a pathetic sleeping curse. The enchantress closed her eyes and massaged the side of her head. And since then, Sleeping Beauty has been my own personal nightmare, she said. You should have seen her face when I attacked her in the forest, though. There she was, the martyr queen, trembling with fear. It was priceless. Esmea smiled to herself and let out a chuckle. You wanted me to kidnap her when she was a baby, and you cursed her for 100 years, and now you've covered her kingdom in vines and thorns, Rumpelstiltskin said. Why do you hate Queen Sleeping Beauty so much? Esmea glanced at him sideways as she contemplated her honest answer and the answer she would give him. Whatever she said, there was always much more she wasn't saying. That's where everyone gets it wrong, Esmea said. I'll admit, I take great satisfaction in seeing the Eastern Kingdom in a state of turmoil. My reputation was bruised when my fatal spell was reduced into an extensive nap. So there is element of revenge I take great pleasure in. But the reason I've attacked the Eastern Kingdom again has nothing to do with Queen Sleeping Beauty. Then why are you causing all this chaos? Rumpelstiltskin asked, nervously looking at the vines and thorn bushes outside. Everything has its purpose, Esmea said, with a proud and sinister gleam in her eyes. It's been so long since my last public appearance. The world thought I was dead. I needed to show them that I was back and more powerful than ever. And when better than on a day They were celebrating the end of my last curse. It was deliciously evil of me, isn't it? Esmea closed her eyes, and a wide smile grew on her face. What part of our bargain do you want me to fulfill? Rumpelstiltskin asked. Surely you don't want me to kidnap Queen Sleeping Beauty now? It was never Sleeping Beauty that I was after, Esmea said, and angrily paced around the chamber. Sleeping Beauty this, Sleeping Beauty that. She wouldn't even had that ridiculous name if it weren't for me. This puzzled Rumpelstiltskin even more. Then what were you after? He asked. What do you think he's after? If it's not Queen Sleeping Beauty, why would you have cursed her, right? What is he after? What do you think? Or what is she after? I'm sorry. What do you think the Enchantress is after? And look, I think this is the eyes. Well, ignore the kids. I think those are the eyes that she was describing earlier. Ooh, looks scary, huh? Let's see. Oh, really, Emerson? Oh my gosh. That's so sad. All right, let's see what she's after. I was after a child, Esmea confessed. A child of royal blood specifically. It's one of the many things I need to complete. A special project I've been working on. A special project, he asked. You mean taking over the world, I assume? That's what you've always wanted, isn't it? Esmea looked him straight in the eyes. Something like that, she said. And it's a lot harder than it looks. Before I met you, I figured out a way to do it. It's an enchantment of sorts. It's a very complex formula that requires certain properties to be claimed and special assets to be obtained, or assets to obtain. Once I manage to gather all of them together, not even the fairy godmother herself can stop me. Oh, I'm putting a sad face in response to Emerson's answer. You'll find out in a minute who it is or what it is. It's been more than a century since I last saw you, Rumpelstiltskin said. Why have you decided to strike now after all this time? Esmea waved her hand, and the stones in the floor rose to form a large chair. You haven't been around, Rumpy, Esmea said, and took a seat. While you've been locked away, I have had I have had quite the century. It's not as if I've been lying around this whole time. I've been betrayed. I've been poisoned. I've come back from the verge of death, stronger and more powerful than ever. Poisoned? Rumpelstiltskin asked. By whom? Evely, Esmea said. Or is it Evely? Evely or Evely? What should I name it? Short E or long E? What do you think, Emerson? Do you call it Evely or do you call it Evely? I'll let Emerson decide because he's the only one who's live right now. Long E or short E? How do you read it? Because I think when I was reading book one, I kind of kept getting stuck on this name. What do you think? Long E, short E? You'll make the final decision for me, Emerson. Evely. Okay, I like that one better actually because it kind of sounds evil, huh? All right, Evely it is. He said Longy. All right. Evely, Esmea said, the name as if it were a disease. Evely, Rumpelstiltskin said. Who's that? She was supposed to be my solution, Esmea said. However, she ended up being my greatest disappointment. She waved her hand again, and the stones in the floor formed a stool for Rumpelstiltskin to sit on. It's a long story, so have a seat, Esmea ordered. Rumpelstiltskin didn't argue. After I cursed the Eastern Kingdom, I went into hiding, Esmea explained. I may have been the most powerful fairy in the world, but I was no match for all the other fairies put together. I knew I couldn't strike again until I was further along with the project, until I was past the point of no return. So I plotted in secret, keeping a watchful eye on all the kingdoms for the pieces I needed to continue my work. I assembled a quaint little castle in the northeast where no one could find me, and plotted out what my next move would be. but it required so many elements outside my reach, I knew I would have to be patient. I brought many troubled souls into the castle, hoping to produce a proper apprentice, but they all failed me, each being a bigger disappointment than the last. Many years later, in the charming kingdom, when the late King Chester was just a prince, the palace had an unexpected visitor one night. A young maiden banged on the palace doors, seeking shelter from a horrible rainstorm. Chester instantly fell in love with her and asked his parents for permission to propose. Being the old fashioned king and queen they were, Chester's parents said he could only marry the maiden if he could prove she was of royal blood. So the prince devised a plan to test the maiden's royal status. He made her a bed in the guest chambers with a stack of dozen mattresses and placed a pea under the very bottom, convincing his parents that only a royal could feel the imperfection through the mattress. The next morning, the maiden complained about a restless night, and Chester was certain he had found his future wife. He asked for the maiden's hand in marriage, but she refused his proposal. The maiden had a secret. She had tossed and turned with discomfort all night because she was pregnant, not because she was a princess. The maiden had been a simple peasant runaway, embarrassed to be with child out of wedlock. She disappeared from the palace as quickly as she came, and Prince Chester never saw her again. Naturally, when I heard about this so called pregnant princess on the run, I was intrigued. Knowing I needed a royal child, I tracked her down in the forest where she was living on her own in a cave. To my delight, she was very much with child when I discovered her. I made her an offer she couldn't refuse. In exchange for her child, I would give her a life of riches and luxury beyond her wildest dreams as usual. What would you guys do? Trade your baby for all the richness in the world. Would you do it? Would you take the trade? You would never have to work ever again. You would always be rich. You would always have money. You could buy whatever you want, not worry about anything, but trade it for a baby. What do you think? For your firstborn. Good trade? Bad trade? What do you think, Emerson? Would you have done it? Waiting for his response. I know there's like a little bit of a delay on my chat. No way. No, bad. It's a bad trade. I agree. I agree, right? Oh man, this is crazy, huh? She agreed and the deal was made. Wow, she made the deal. Oh my gosh, unfortunately, of course, after giving birth, she backed out of our agreement shortly before giving birth to the child. She ran into a neighboring village and died giving birth to a little girl whom the villagers had named Evely. I soon discovered that the maiden hadn't been a royal, and Evely couldn't be the child I needed. I let the villagers raise her while I conceived another plan to get use out of Evely after all. I was going to train her to seduce and marry Prince White of the Northern Kingdom. Together they would produce the heir, and I would finally have the child of royal blood that I desired. Unfortunately, when I returned for Evely in her adolescence, she had fallen madly in love with one of the village boys, a pathetic, aspiring poet by the name of Mira. I took Evely to my castle in the northeast to begin training, but all she did was cry and whine every day and day and night about how much she missed Mira. So I brought the boy to her, imprisoning him inside a magic mirror. I thought it had been a kind gesture on my part, but it only caused Evely to grow more spiteful. She conducted a plan of her own against me. She broke into my room of potions and concocted a poison so strong that when a few drops touched the ground outside her window, all the trees and plants for miles around were killed. Ooh, I feel like they need that now, huh? evilly laced a small dagger with the poison and stabbed me with it. The poison almost killed me. I shriveled down to the state of a dying human. I lost all my power and all my beauty and all hope. And no, all hope that I would fulfill my plans for the future. I ran as far away as I could, fearing evilly would try to finish me off, but the stupid girl was so consumed with trying to free Mira, she forgot all about me. An old witch named Hagatha found me in the woods, barely alive. She recognized me and the effects of the poison. She brought me to her small hut in the dwarf forests and nursed me back to health. I became her apprentice, but she treated me horribly, taking advantage of the person I once was. She sent me out on the most gruesome errands and forced me to sleep outside like an animal. Ironically, the poison is also what saved me. The happily ever after assembly had been looking for me since I cursed the Eastern Kingdom. They didn't recognize me in my frail state and decided I was dead. But one day, a few decades later, Hagatha and I were collecting plants from the thornbush pit, and she planted around her hut. She was forcing me to do all the work, and my hands were scraped and scratched from all the thorns. I remember feeling more angry than I had ever felt in my life. I was furious that I, the woman who had once been more powerful than anyone else, had become a witch's slave. And with this anger, I felt something different. Suddenly, I felt alive again, like a candle had been relit inside of me. After many long years, my body had finally recovered from the effects of the poison, and my powers had come back. It's true what they say: what doesn't kill you makes it stronger. I'm living proof. I was more powerful than ever before. My powers were different too. My magic had always come from a happily ever after source, coming from a life among fairies. That's why every curse I created could be broken with a kiss or a token of affection, but not anymore. This time my magic had no limits. I pushed Hagatha into the pit and cursed the vines and thorn bushes to trap anything that came close to it, as Mia confessed. You pushed her into the thornbush pit? Rumpelstiltskin asked. All this time, that's been your magic festering in the godless place? Indeed, the enchantress said with a boastful shrug. Believe me, I wanted to take the credit for it, but I still had work to do before I went public again. I returned to the castle and collected all my belongings, ready to complete what I had started so long ago. But I knew that I would have to continue being patient. The kingdoms were experiencing a golden age. Cinderella and Prince Charming were married, Sleeping Beauty had just awoken, Snow White was crowned queen. I knew if I waited until the right moment, my return would have a much bigger impact, and now it has. Rumpelstiltskin feared what her newfound strength would mean for the future of the kingdoms. I never understood you, he said. You used to be so admired and loved by the whole world. Why wasn't that enough? When did this all go wrong? The enchantress looked at the floor with a snide expression. People only love you as long as they're getting something out of you. But the minute you say something they don't want to hear or do something you don't want to see, all the admiration drains from their hearts. But why this obsession with power? Rumpelstiltskin asked as cautiously as possible. Why do you need the world, Esmea? Esmea let out a long sigh. I have my reasons, she said sharply, and quite frankly, I don't give a damn if you or anyone else understands. A tension grew in the room, but it wasn't between Esmea and Rumpelstiltskin. It was between Esmea and the world. But where do I fit in? Rumpelstiltskin asked. If you're so powerful now, why do you need me? Well, that's simple, Esmea said. Out of all my apprentices over the years, you have been the most loyal to me, Rumpy. You actually started what I asked of you, and now I'm going to let you finish it. Besides, it'll be nice to have a friend around once I take over. They exchanged a weighty glance, both aware that this was nothing close to a friendship. There's another child, isn't there? Rumpelstiltskin asked with a heavy heart, already knowing the answer. You want me to kidnap another child? Precisely, the enchantress said. Rumpelstiltskin lowered his head and closed his eyes. He knew he wouldn't have a choice this time. Refusal would mean death. Well, That's enough catching up for one day, Hesmia said, and glided toward the door with a newfound spring in her step. Come along, Rumpy. There's much work to be done. I've waited almost 2 centuries for this, so as you can imagine, I've grown very impatient. The stones sank back into the ground, and Rumpelstiltskin fell on his behind. Where are you going? He asked. Hagatha's old hut, the enchantress said. It's where I've been spending most of my time since my castle was destroyed a year ago. You should see what I've done with the place. A little magic goes a long way in the dwarf forests. Rumpelstiltskin nostalgically looked around at his tiny cell. It had never seemed so much like home until he was being forced to leave it. I just have to say goodbye, Rumpelstiltskin said sadly. Esmea raised an eyebrow, knowing, not knowing who on earth he was talking about. Perhaps prison had been harder on her small friend than she'd imagined. Rumpelstiltskin got on the floor and took the bowl off the daisy. I have to go now, he said, fighting back tears. Please don't look at me like that. You'll be all right. He lightly stroked one of its white petals. Goodbye, little flower. Please take care of yourself. Oh, the poor flower. How is he going to get sun now? Rumpelstiltskin stood and walked through the doorway, leaving his cell for the first time in 127 years, but stepping into a world of even harsher imprisonment. Esmea lingered in the doorway, glaring down at the flower. She couldn't believe something so small and inferior could be so important, so protected, or so loved. It ignited a fire inside her. The enchantress waved a hand in its direction, and the daisy withered away, crumbling into bits of nothing. A smile appeared on her face, so satisfied to destroy something even so small. Oh, the poor little flower. That was a good chapter. I like that chapter. Wow. So we learned a lot about the evil queen, right? Oh my gosh, I wonder what's going to happen next. I don't know. I think Rumpelstiltskin would have done a little bit better staying in jail, huh? He wasn't complaining much. He was actually enjoying his life with his friend, his new friend, for 127 years. He got out now, but it's not really freedom, is it? I feel like he's like more imprisoned. Does that make any sense? I feel like he was imprisoned in jail, right? He was imprisoned, but coming out of that prison, he's imprisoned even more because there's like this evil, he has to work under this evil lady, right? Or, yeah, evil lady, the Enchantress. Ah! All right, I wonder which baby, right? He has to kidnap now. All right, well, that's the end of the chapter. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Thanks for joining, Emerson. Bye. Have a good day. Be safe. Keep your masks on. And don't forget to what? Smash that like button. Bye, Emerson. Bye, guys.